What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on the Soren Baker Show. We appreciate you guys tuning in every week. Of course, I try to bring you guys great interviews and content, all different types of things, all different layers of the entertainment world. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by an amazing musician, producer, and someone that's been around some of the most important movements in music. Forget just rap, just music, period, and has worked with many of the biggest artists in music history. So for that reason and many more, which we're about to get into for the next hour here of the Soren Baker Show, please help me welcome Mr. Colin Wolfe. Thank you for coming through, sir.
Yes, sir.
So for everybody that may know the name but isn't super familiar with Colin's work, and it's Wolfe with an E, for everybody that needs to Google that, W-O-L-F-E.
And Colin with one L.
Yes. But please do yourself a favor and look up his discography and his work, because it's not only robust, but it's jaw-dropping, the amount of work that he's done, both as a musician, producer, and someone that's helped shape some of the biggest records in rap history, and I would argue by default then music history. And we're going to get into a lot of that here today on the Soren Baker Show. And thank you guys for coming in. And here we get ready to go. So, Colin Wolfe, so you're born and raised in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And what do you remember before you started working with the Dr. Dre's and the Dungeon Families and the Michael Jacksons and the Madonnas and all the people that you ended up working with? How and why do you think you were drawn to music?
Well, it's kind of a tough one. Always drawn to music, but my first introduction would be, and this is crazy, my blind twin cousins who used to babysit me and my brother.
Wow, okay.
And they were musicians. I think I was probably about 3 at the time, so my brother would have been 4.
Okay.
And they used to try to teach him stuff on the piano, and you'd be sitting on the chair or whatever watching them, and they get up, and after a while, frustrated from he couldn't learn it. And I teach myself what they was trying to teach him. So from that point on, whatever instrument I was around, I would just pick up and play. Another cousin of mine took me up the street to a drummer's house. I had never played drums in my life.
Okay.
I was about 7, just picked up the 6 and started hitting the beat.
Wow.
And then elementary school, I was the president of the school, and had my boys come play during Halloween, during the lunch assembly. So they asked me to play bass on Day Tripper. But I didn't play bass.
By the Beatles, Day Tripper?
Was that? Yeah.
By the Beatles?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the first song I learned on the bass, and from that point on, kept playing bass. And I think a year and a half after that was already doing professional gigs.
Wow.
Doing these musical plays at a place called Inner City Cultural Center. They used to be around back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then how, as you progressed, one thing I think is important is we see throughout recorded music history, but then as we've evolved now, everything is so built on music being created to a large degree, not exclusively, of course, but to a large degree on computer. What do you remember about the environment of being a musician, and especially at the time being a black musician in Los Angeles in, I assume this was the early to mid 80s at the time by that point?
Well, then I was was bused young. So went to Paul Revere Junior High School, which is in Brentwood, and then went to Palisades High School, which is in the Palisades.
Is that the one off Temescal Canyon? Yep.
So, but by me having that integration, I learned about the Beatles, Zeppelin, The Who, The Stones, Hendrix, and that whole other side of music. Of course, I grew up listening to Gap Band, Parliament Funkadelic, and all that stuff. So that just opened my ears and eyes up to just a wide range of music, So I wanted to take it all in, and I did. I was in the group when all we played was the Stones and Zeppelin and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
So, and for a short time, was also in the group with J.J. Abrams. We have a recording group.
Wow.
So,
got to get some scores out of that. Get some scores.
Exactly. So I was introduced to a wide range of music, and my brother and his friends used to tease me for listening to Zeppelin and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I didn't realize later that, oh shit, that was the shit.
Right.
That stuff was dope.
Well, I remember I kind of learned a lot about music through rap backwards. So Schoolie D on his Smoke Some Kill album had sampled Cashmere, and it was on the Signifying Rapper song on the Smoke Some Kill album. And I don't remember how I found out it was Led Zeppelin, but I remember thinking like, oh man, Schoolie is so amazing. I knew he was sampling like Sly and the Family Stone and all these other people, but I didn't know. I think he had sampled like Leonard Skinner or Steve Miller Band, that type of stuff, but I didn't realize he was sampling Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So when I found that out, and my dad didn't really listen to Led Zeppelin, so that made it even more curious to me.
Yeah.
But it's just very interesting to hear, like Schoolie D's actually a musician as well, and Kwame, who I've had on the Soren Baker show as well, like he's a musician and he studied all forms of music.
Yeah.
And of course, as we talk about who you've worked with throughout your career, from the Dr. Dre's to the organized Noize, just what is the benefit that you now understand of not listening to only soul or only funk or only R&B or only rock?
That I was able to adapt, and it helped just come up with ideas for whatever kind of beat Dre would give me. Like for instance on Real Niggas Don't Die, it was just he had a sample going and then the drums going, and then the line I came up with was, it's like a rock line. It was just dun 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 dun. So by me having the little rock background, it just came natural for me.
And I think on that song in particular, the thing that I always loved about it was the element that it had an extra heft to it that a lot of rap songs didn't because of that. And it wasn't like just to use the obvious example, it wasn't like the Run DMC where it had like a overt electric guitar.
Yeah.
This was more of like a harder edge that fit more with rap. It didn't seem like it was sandwiched on top of it.
Right. No, I know what you mean. Well, because I'm listening to the drums and I'm trying to get a bass line that goes with the drums. So it's more of a pocket thing, I would think.
Right. Now let's take it back, because I think one of the more interesting things is that, if I understand correctly, you actually got into the Ruthless fold by one of their least known artists. So explain Mr. Z and how that all...
Oh, Jimmy Z.
Yeah, how that all came to be, because I think people forget the breadth of what Eazy-E actually did and the variety of artists that Ruthless had, especially for what was known as a rap label, that he had a wide range of artists.
Definitely.
And I don't think people really understand or appreciate that.
Lonely too, they was on there. Well, that was because, as you know, my first introduction to that whole camp was Miss Chalet. And I was playing bass for somebody at the China Club in Hollywood years ago.
Okay.
And right when I was doing the bass solo, through these big old doors, Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Jerry Heller, L.A. Dre, the whole Ruthless camp walked in, and they were looking for a bass player to go on tour with Miss Chalet.
Okay.
So after I did that little tour, then me and Dre became good friends, and I started hanging out with them in the studio, and then just was in the studio every day with them. And then he was like, won't you help me with this project? So,
and that's... Are you referring to 100 Miles and Running at first?
Exactly. That was first. So then we would meet at the studio every day at 12. That would go until about 5 or 6. And then Jimmy Z would come in later. And me and Dre would work on Jimmy Z after that.
Okay.
So that was our weekly schedule. Took the weekends off. And that was a weekly schedule.
So wait, you were working on N.W.A.
During the daytime.
And Jimmy Z.
Jimmy Z.
That's
at
about
night.
as far away from N.W.A. as you could get. That being said, working on 100 Miles and Running, that's right after, of course, Cube, everyone knows, left the group.
Yeah.
And that was their first project after his departure.
Yeah.
So for you, I wanted you to explain, like, to what degree or magnitude or level were you even into rap at that point?
I wasn't, not really.
Okay.
Because I'm still learning as a musician, so I'm listening to like Stanley Clarke, Jaco Pastorius.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Nathan East, stuff like that. And by me, well, the majority of the rap that we heard first was East Coast rap.
Right.
It was all samples. So I paid no mind to that stuff. I'm
But
like,
what about Larry Smith? Because a lot of his he had a live like Houdini
oh yeah.
in particular.
Yeah, you're right. Some of that other stuff was creative. Houdini and African Bambaataa and
Right.
a lot of those cats were creating some stuff for sure.
Right.
But then after that era,
Yeah,
I guess you would say
it got into
that's when the heavy sampling
purely
became relevant. But you're right. That early era, not so much sampling.
right. And that's something that I think is always intriguing, which is why I think the records and the stuff that you've worked on and the people that you worked with, even when you weren't working with them, they always often had a lot of live instrumentation to it.
Yeah.
And I think that, and Schoolie D is one of them, but I think it's just amazing that if people really understood just adding one element of something live to a song just adds such an extra dimension, in addition to it being creative and different and distinctive because you're not relying solely on sampling.
Yeah. And to me, a lot of producers are only as good as the samples they find.
Right.
They can't just come up with their own thing just from thin air, from nothing, you know?
So back to 100 Miles and Running. With that, Cube had left the group. So for you, did you understand like the significance at the time of Ice Cube is no longer in his group?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. But yes and no. And I would say yes because, you know, I would hear them in the studio talking about it and stuff like that. And
well, what did they say? Because I've always heard different things. And like, what was your experience and what were people saying?
Well, just mostly they would talk about, like, if certain people would come into the studio just randomly, they'd talk about different encounters they had with Ice Cube at different events or different places or whatever.
Okay.
So, other than that, not so much from the group within.
Right. Yeah, because Doc had told me one time, and I had put this in my book, The History of Gangster Rap, that the members of N.W.A. didn't even understand it at the time, what they lost with Ice Cube. But looking back, Doc told me that he realized that N.W.A. had lost its soul because of his, obviously Ice Cube is one of the best rappers of all time and one of the best storytellers, one of the best writers, one of the best conceptual guys. And to lose that at about to be its apex of what he did is, you know, it's a staggering blow. But sonically, of course, I think with 100 Miles and Running and then the Niggas for Life album, I think those two albums showed that's, to me, especially Niggas for Life, is where Dre as a producer, to me, exploded and just became a whole other beast because it was because 100 Miles and Running and before, you know, it was Bomb Squad-ish. It had 17,000 samples on every song almost.
Yeah.
So for you, what did you realize or what did you see adding in the different live elements? Like, what did Dre like about it? What do you think what did you like about it? Like, and what did Yella say? Like,
I mean, Yella would just sit back and watch us do our thing.
Okay.
But I mean, some of the times Jay would just give me a beat and I would just, you know, come up with stuff on top of it. Or we would listen to some things and kind of do something like it and change a note or two or whatever. But yeah, we tried
like
to
the interpolations, as they would call them.
Exactly. But for the most part, we tried to add all the live elements. And usually the only things that were sampled were the drum sounds or loops or something like that, or some crazy little vocal or something like that. But for the most part, we tried to do all the music stuff live. And you had to. It was 2-inch at that time.
Right.
So there was no cutting, copying, and pasting and duplicating. None of that stuff. You had to play from top to bottom.
And then that was also around the time, I think not coincidentally, that Biz Markie and a bunch of people started getting, De La Soul were getting sued for all the sampling.
They weren't clearing them.
So do you remember, like, what was going on internally at Ruthless, was that an issue for you guys? Was it not? Did it not matter?
It wasn't. Well, especially like you said on the Niggas for Life album, we had a lot of live elements.
Mm-hmm.
There still were some samples, but we did have. There was a company that was clearing all that stuff.
Okay, so at least you guys were protected.
Yeah.
That's good.
And they knew they had to clear it and all that stuff. So
Now, somebody also coming from the musical background that you had, and as a musician, what did you think of like the lyrics and the content? Was it like surprising to you? Was it like what did you think?
I enjoyed it. It was very definitely entertaining. The first time when I heard "Fuck the Police," I was in the car with my brother, my friend, and my grandfather.
Wow.
And we're going up to Santa Barbara for, I think, Thanksgiving or something like that. And we're all listening to the lyrics. And after every other line that Cube was saying, we're like, yup. You know what I mean? Agreeing with everything he was saying.
Right.
So
it's hard not to.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. So back in the Niggas for Life album, I don't know. It was just fun to me. And it was just really dope just watching the whole process from, the first snare, the first hi-hat to the end product.
And that album, too, I think, so it came out in 91, and way more so than Straight Outta Compton and way more so than 100 Miles and Running, it just had this, like, to me, it had like a dark overcoat to it, sonically.
Yeah.
Because it just felt totally different in a much more, I don't want to say evil, but it just had a very like sinister.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was going to say. But it was like super sinister sonically. So do you remember from what you were coming up with or what Dre was telling everybody to do, was that like an objective or that just how it happened?
Just how it happened. And then, well, when my mindset was like being N.W.A, like we wanted to do things that were weird and eerie sounding.
Mm-hmm.
So we would know, and that's the beauty about being a musician in that setting. You didn't have to depend on the records. We can play what we wanted, what we heard.
Mm-hmm.
We can just play it.
Right.
Play like a minor night. There's some crazy notes together to achieve the effect or sound that we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beauty about having musicians there, or having someone like me there. We can actually compose it ourselves.
Right.
We didn't have to go searching for records to try to find that sound we're trying to hear in our head. We pick up an instrument and figure it out.
And also on that album, we're gonna take a quick break for a minute here with Colin Wolfe, and we're about to get into some more N.W.A behind the scenes information right here on the Soren Baker Show. All right, everybody, thanks for coming back here to the Soren Baker Show. Today we are joined by producer, instrumentalist, musician extraordinaire Colin Wolfe, and we're talking right now about N.W.A and working with them. And after Ice Cube left the group, I think it's important to explain the kind of Doc maybe taking even more of a role as a writer, Cocaine coming in as a writer.
Yeah.
So as you see these things changing, like, and rap, even at that time, had such a big deal with everybody wrote their own lyrics. So in that environment, why do you think it was normal, acceptable, no one cared that Cocaine is writing this, or Dre's writing for somebody else, or Doc is writing for somebody else, or Ren is writing for somebody? Like, why do you think that was not a big deal for you guys?
Well, because I think at the end of the day, all we cared about was the end result.
Okay.
And I mean, Eazy never wrote any of stuff in the first place. Cube wrote most of it back then. Either Cube or D.O.C. or Ren.
Right.
Yeah. So Cocaine coming in was just add another element and add another energy, I guess, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Hutch probably wrote some stuff too. And then Doc, definitely took on more roles and wrote most of Dre's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Doc was still, as far as his pen goes, he was still peaking at that time.
Oh yeah.
So he still had, and it still does, had skills. So
yeah. And then musically, we had on We Want Easy, of course, with Bootsy Collins,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'd Rather Fuck You, of course, Bootsy Collins as well. So what do you remember, or why was Bootsy such like a main influence musically?
It was not only Bootsy, but that whole Parliament Funkadelic, because they were exactly what we wanted to be, just out there and just eerie sounds and just funky. And that was them on the funk side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where their whole sound was, psychedelic funk.
Right.
So, and they would do these crazy time signatures and just crazy bass lines and stuff. And yeah, we definitely gravitated towards that for sure.
Okay. So then what was a song that really surprised you from that album, like when it was done? Like, whoa, like what was something that really struck you as kind of strange or incredible or just different?
Definitely, I mean, the days of Way Back was definitely dope.
Okay.
Just when that thing, when it just first comes on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, the whole record was just sonically was just like you said, was just something else.
Mm-hmm.
And with good mixes and good mastering on that one.
Well,
But
I really think that's Dre's best produced album in so many ways, just sonically, and because you had Always Into Something, you had Days of Way Back where it kind of changed sonically and the feel of it, but then you also had Automobile and I'd Rather Fuck You, which did that, and then you also had like Message to BA.
right,
You just had
right.
all, and then of course all the hard songs, Appetite
Yeah.
for Destruction, and then
yeah,
everything else
Real
that
Niggas
was
Don't Die and
yeah.
so forth and so forth. Yeah.
But I just I don't know. I just always that sonically and the feel of that album, I just always think that to me is the best Dre album, in my opinion.
Well, and I think, and back to the whole having your own instruments on there, well, now you can control the bass even more as opposed to it coming from a sample
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with all this filter stuff. No, you have the actual bass, so you can really tweak it and get the tone out of it you want to make it sound like a real record.
Right,
you know?
right.
I think that was a big difference.
Okay. And then, the album goes number one once SoundScan is introduced. And that's an important thing because everybody says, oh, it debuted at number one. It didn't. It was, I think, number two.
Right.
And then SoundScan came out the week after, and then it became number one.
Yeah.
And that's just amazing to show how once rap got a much fairer shake at what was actually being sold as opposed to guesstimations or the trickery that goes on behind the scenes, it was much more accurate that N.W.A., not even in his first week, was still the number one best-selling album. But then, of course, soon thereafter, the group disbands.
Yeah.
And for you, was it purely because of the relationship musically you had with Dre that you rolled with him and not with Eazy? Like, why?
Yeah, because my relationship was with Dre.
Okay.
So, and I mean, there was a point where we're in the studio every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. So yeah, definitely, yeah, that was a natural progression, I guess you can say.
Okay. That being said, with Eazy-E, looking back as someone who's now worked with a lot of the biggest people in music, what do you think was special or distinctive or different about what Eazy-E brought as a artist or as a businessman that made what Ruthless was so significant?
Well, putting street cred on it for one,
mm-hmm.
and then just pushing the right buttons and getting the right street teams and marketing and all that stuff, and I mean that made a big difference. And then they used to sell the records and tapes and stuff out of the trunk of the car at the swap meet. So, I mean, you have to kind of have that kind of passion for your own thing for it to catch on. I mean, Nipsey was basically doing the same thing. He talks about it briefly in the interview I saw him do.
Right.
So I think just having the passion and to go through it-ness, because a lot of people start something but don't finish it.
Right. Yeah, consistency is key.
Consistency and integrity.
Right. And that's something that, of course, Dr. Dre brought to Death Row, which you followed him and worked with him on that. And it was interesting to me later when I found out that Deep Cover wasn't done totally separate from the recording of The Chronic. Wasn't it? Didn't you guys do it have to like in the middle because you had to do the soundtrack real quick or something?
Yeah, I was in the middle.
So because sonically that record in particular has a very different feel, was that more because of the soundtrack, or why do you think sonically that's so different from The Chronic?
Yeah, it has something to do with the soundtrack, and then also, I mean, I used this one bass called a Clevenger Jr., and it was the only time we used the bass. It was a fretless bass, and you would hold it like a bass guitar, but it sounded like an upright. So that's why that tone with that loop just set it off.
Right.
You know, if that was done on a Moog, it wouldn't have sounded like that.
Okay. Because I remember that record being played at like a stadium when I went to a concert in Maryland, and that was one of the most thunderous beats I've ever heard in my life on in a stadium where it's like 18,000 seat arena.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that because that was like one of the most impressive things I've ever heard in my life. It was astonishing.
Yeah.
But then as you work on The Chronic and stuff, what did you realize or notice how all of you guys were growing and developed musically? Like what really changed from Ruthless to Death Row on the music side, in your opinion?
Well, by the time we got to the Chronic album, then I start to understand really how to make records and what Dre liked to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So me being a musician, I can put that, I guess, in language, if you will, by knowing what notes he likes to hear and stuff like that. So by me understanding it more, just made it that much easier and quicker for us to come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And then him knowing, just give me a funky beat or a dope beat and just let me do what I do. And so I think everybody's starting to understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
Snoop and them, they would get into a rap circle damn near every day. So they were constantly pushing each other.
Right.
Then they had D.O.C as a mentor. So.
And then I think that's an important point to examine too, because going from, by the time you had been with N.W.A, they had already had a huge success with Straight Outta Compton, but then you worked with them under extreme duress.
Yeah.
With Cube leaving. And then when you're with Death Row and, the Death Row inmates, as they were known at the time, and later known more, I guess, as the Dog Pound group of artists, they were dealing with a different type of duress, which is being broke and not put on.
Yeah.
So and obviously everybody's different, but what do you notice in those two different scenarios of the type of way artists approach it, from having pressure but being super successful versus having pressure because you're broke and you don't know what you're going to do?
Right. Well, the first scenario with N.W.A, I mean, we put in the time. Like I said, we would show up to the studio every day at 12, Monday through Friday. So we put in the work, that it takes to have a successful project. So, I mean, and the sessions were mad cool and chill. For the most part, be me, Dre, Yella, Ren would come and sit in and write some lyrics. D.O.C would be there, but there wasn't a whole lot of people in there distracting us, so
That's
we were
helpful.
able to get a lot of stuff done.
Right.
And they would, people would show up in the evenings and stuff, but they wouldn't show up during the day while we're there working. So we were able to work in some pretty calm conditions and come up with ideas and stuff.
And I also heard, too, from a lot of people, but from your opinion, you don't remember there wasn't really like a lot of smoking or drinking or anything, right?
In the N.W.A sessions?
Right.
There wasn't.
Okay.
Drinking, maybe, yeah. Maybe some drinking, and if there was smoking, it wouldn't have been where we were.
Okay.
in the studio room where we were. It would have been on the other side and where people hung out.
Gotcha.
And the lobby wasn't big.
Right.
You know what I mean, a couple of chairs, 2 or 3 chairs or something like that.
Okay.
So for the most part, yeah, it wasn't how the Death Row sessions became to be, where you had a gang of people up in there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so now the difference between that scenario and the other scenario was, yeah, they were broke and tried to put on, but they were still humble at this time.
Okay.
So nobody was tripping, you know what I mean? They were just happy to be there and happy to be creating. You know, once it got further down the line, then it started to get a little worrisome and just, you know, had to worry about what might happen to you. You know, you say something wrong to somebody or whatever, like, and that's not the kind of condition you want to be in at the studio.
Not at all. And we're going to take a quick break here with Colin Wolfe and get back to it because the environment at Death Row, I think, is very important, and we're going to address that real quick here on the Soren Baker Show as soon as we take this quick break. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, we're back here on the Soren Baker Show, joined by Colin Wolfe. He's coming through today and giving us a lot of great info and insight on some of the most important records ever made. And right now we're talking about Death Row and the environment of recording and how and why did things change so dramatically in the environment from going from Ruthless with almost no one around at the height of N.W.A. versus Death Row hasn't sold one record yet and there's however many people there?
Well, first off, there was a lot of people there because the Dog Pound was a big crew in itself.
Right.
So, you know, you have those cats there and then their friends coming along. That, yeah, there was a lot of people there. But they were all cool at the beginning. They were all cool.
Right.
I think, you know, once Suge started coming in with him and his boys, then, yeah, things started to get a little dicey.
Mm-hmm.
Not really with me per se, but I've definitely seen some stuff.
And how does that, if it didn't affect you directly, how did you notice it affected the other recording artists though? Like how did the environment change? I know Snoop had told me from my book, The History of Gangster Rap, that, you know, they would kind of do like Kung Fu. They would battle each other all the time and then pick verses or
yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, exactly.
But then how, you know, as more and more people started showing up, did that kind of camaraderie and back and forthness disappear or like get reduced, or was it even more crazy?
Well, when we got to, we wouldn't allow all those people to hang out in the room where we're creating.
Oh, okay.
Like that definitely could not happen because we wouldn't be able to create.
Right.
So they'd be in the other rooms, in the lobbies or whatever. So, you know, only like the people that are writing on the song right there would be in there. Otherwise, the people that they knew to shut the fuck up and just sit your ass in the back and be quiet while we're doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? Otherwise, yeah, you would get kicked out the studio.
Okay.
But for the most part, that was all going on down the hall in the lobby and whatnot. So inside the room, yeah, they would like look at each other's verses and go back and forth. And I think that's what made the writing so dope because they were helping each other out, listening to each other and checking each other and whatever.
Yeah, and the thing too that when I was working on my book that just staggered me as I thought about it, because I knew it as a fact, but to think about it was that everything that Dre did and continues to do is bigger than what he did before.
Yeah.
When what you think he did before is the biggest thing that could ever be. So once The Chronic comes out, and of course Ice Cube, you know, had just put out Death Certificate the year before. Ice Cube had also had America's Most Wanted. N.W.A. is gone. And Dre is bigger than N.W.A. or The Chronic is bigger than N.W.A. is bigger than Ice Cube, and not by a little bit, by a lot. And then Snoop Doggy Style is even bigger than The Chronic.
Yeah.
So to understand and to witness that and to see that, like how musically does that even, like how does that happen?
Well, by just understanding what you have and just, okay, well now we got to do it again and just keep trying to better yourself and outdo yourself. So that might mean spending more time in the studio than you did before. So yeah, just keep progressing and keep on going.
Okay. And then this is also around the time when you ended up going to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So how
it was actually, I left. The album hadn't even come out yet.
Right.
When I left, because I started to see.
You started to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also, that's when Warren G and MC Breed approached me to help write and co-produce "Gotta Get Mine" with Warren G. And then from that point on, Breed asked me to go back to Atlanta with him to help him finish the whole album.
Right. And that ended up being Breed's biggest song and biggest album, which is amazing in the sense that Ain't No Future in Your Front was huge.
It was a dope record.
Yeah, that was an amazing record.
Yeah.
And also, heavy with the Parliament Funkadelic, with the Funky Worm that had been used, obviously, with Dope Man and other records on Ruthless, but then MC Breed and the D.O.C. did it remarkably well as well. But MC Breed, I think, obviously, unfortunately, he's passed away, but I think he's one of those artists that I think quietly put out a string of really, really good albums.
Yeah.
And for you, beyond the fact of the drama that was starting to really accelerate at Death Row, like, how did Warren G get the opportunity, and why did you just say, I'll just work on something else in L.A.? Why move to Atlanta?
Well, that's where MC Breed was based out of.
Well, why not have him just come here? Or, I'm just saying, you could have just gone there for 2 months and come back, but you actually left.
Yep, I did. Well, because I saw that Dre was looking out more, not Dre, but Suge was looking out more for some of his folks than they were me or some of the people that was helped coming up with the music.
Right.
Like, there was a moment when everybody was getting, like, these Death Row jackets and all this and that. I see his boys walking around with jackets. I'm like, where's mine? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's coming. No, I never got one. So I'm like, okay. Looking out for his boys before looking out for somebody that's helped creating a project. And,
right.
And, seeing people get beat up and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, yeah,
not
this
the
ain't
bad
for me.
And then, so in the early to mid 90s, going down to Atlanta, this was before Short moved there, right?
Or right before.
Right before. Because Breed obviously is from Michigan, but then had moved down to Atlanta, and he was on Rap / Ichiban Records.
Yeah.
So with that, what made Warren? How did Warren G and Breed connect? Do you know?
I think it has something to do. I think D.O.C. somehow. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But when they approached me, Warren G had a drum loop and maybe a guitar sample. That's it.
Okay.
And so I put all the music on top of it and did this at the beach house Dre was renting in Malibu. So I wired the board together and was out there working for a little bit. So.
Okay. And then what was obviously L.A. was doing very well with DJ Quick, Compton's Most Wanted. There was a huge explosion of artists, Cube, of course. Now you have Death Row emerging, and at this point, Bone Thugs is about to come out from Cleveland, but obviously on Ruthless. And then you go down to Atlanta. What was the difference in the music scene at the time compared to what was going on in L.A.?
Well, when I got to Atlanta after the Breed album, that's when the Chronic album came out. So now everybody in the industry is trying to find out where I'm at and who's the cat who played all that stuff on that record.
Right.
So I had publishers calling me from L.A. to New York. Everybody in Atlanta knew. So I met this one girl, and she was like, oh, you're Colin Wolfe? She was like, my boss has been looking for you. We heard you were out here. It was Claude Austin, Dallas Austin's brother.
Wow, okay.
So went to the studio with them the next day. From that point on, stayed out there for 7 years.
Right.
So, and then now, not only hip hop, but now we're doing Monica and Sammy and stuff like that. So I was able to expand and widen my production skills and not do just hip hop.
Right.
And learn about the whole songwriting part and all that kind of stuff. So,
and then one of my favorite things of this era that you worked on was on Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, Hootie Hoo. So on that record on Outkast, so that came out in '94. But the thing I wanted to get from you is there's the Dre Yella team, and then there's the Organized Noize team.
Yeah.
And Organized Noize, obviously are musicians as well. But what do you see? What were the differences of how they work?
Well, there are probably more similarities, if anything.
Okay.
Because they wanted live musicianship too, and they understood sonically, I think, how the impact would be with live instruments. So they would give me the notes or give me the bass line and just have me do my thing, but then also have me do my own thing as well with it. So they gave me the basic part and then just let me do me.
And then artistically, of course, you had that's before Outkast came out, working on that record in particular, that song. What did you notice that made them, or what was interesting about them to you? Like
their energy and their lyrics.
Okay.
It was just from the heart and just trill and just gritty. I think just and they weren't trying to be, in the club and this and that. They were just being themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and too with let's get back to MC Breed and stuff too. With what did you notice with Gotta Get Mine, because Breed had such huge success before, and this is all being done for people that don't understand rap and Ichiban. This is a smaller independent label that is selling, with Breed in particular, and then also with Vanilla Ice, selling records on the level of the biggest major labels with those two artists in particular. So with Gotta Get Mine, why do you think that song in particular resonated, as you heard people talk about it at the time and you saw different things going on? Why was it?
Well, I mean, the energy between the back and forthness with him and Tupac,
mm-hmm.
I mean, watching those guys work together was incredible and dope. They had great synergy together, and I don't know. I think once you get that bass line on "I Gotta Get Mine," you're in it.
Right.
When I'm doing those tenths on there, those chord things. I think their synergy together, I think, was help really make that record.
And then what about working with Dre versus working with Warren G? Like, well, how are they similar and different?
Very different, very different. Warren G definitely had a knack for hearing stuff, but didn't know how to create it yet. You know what I mean? He would find good drum loops and good drum sounds and stuff like that. I even find good stuff to sample, but didn't know how to put it together yet. And didn't really understand the notes and all that kind of stuff yet. So,
okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break here on the Soren Baker Show. We're going to come right back and get more into what was going on in Atlanta, because we got one of the best rappers of all time that Colin also worked with that we need to speak on. So we'll be right back here on the Soren Baker Show. All right, everybody. We're back here on the Soren Baker Show, joined today by Colin Wolfe. And we're talking about his move from Los Angeles into Atlanta during what really became the launching pad of what the South would do in Atlanta, in particular with Outkast coming out with Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music and his playing on Hootie Hoo in particular, one of the best album cuts in my opinion on the album. And of course, Master P and many, many others use that little chant for their own purposes later. But another artist and entity that you worked with at this, or soon thereafter, I should say, was Too Short.
Yeah.
And with Short, one of the things that I think people don't appreciate is the musicianship that he also had on his albums. You were on the Getting It album.
Yeah.
But prior to that, Short had a lot of live musicianship before he had moved down to Atlanta and Oakland.
And Banks, Shorty B.
Yeah, Al Eaton.
Yeah.
A lot of great stuff. And he continued that once he moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
But what, for you, when you started working with Short, what was the music conversation like? Because I think people also don't understand that Short's actually a producer too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't understand or appreciate or realize that. So musically, because he had this great foundation from the sonic perspective and even with bass in particular, because that drove a lot of his songs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What was the music conversation like with Short once you started working with him?
I mean, basically, he would just leave me in the room with some instruments, and I would come up with a gang of tracks.
Okay.
And then just that's how it happened. I came up with a gang of tracks, left them with him. Then he must have called me a month or two later. Man, we've been looking for you. We got some checks for you.
Okay.
I'm like, so for the fact that he tracked me down, made sure I got my credit, got my money and all that, I always had the utmost respect for him. Because a lot of people in that position wouldn't have done that.
Right. And why, that's interesting. So you didn't really even work with him at all? It was just more...
I did after, on some later ones, yeah, but initially, yeah, I would I just came with a gang of tracks, and then he would pick some of them.
Okay.
And then, I would come back after and then either add more stuff to it. Mm-hmm. But handing just in studio together, not until after he picked stuff that he was working on the tracks.
So, as somebody that didn't really listen to rap or wasn't super diehard rap guy once you started making rap records or working on making rap records, by the time you get to Too Short in 94, 95, 96-ish time span, at that point, was Too Short somebody you were super familiar with? Did you not know a lot of his stuff? Did you know most of it? Like,
I'm not saying we're not super. Yeah, I mean, coming from the West Coast, you definitely heard Too Short stuff on the radio. So yeah, I was familiar with them for sure. Definitely.
Okay. And what do you think? What element did you bring, or later did you find out that he liked about what you did?
Just keeping it funky, basically, with live instruments.
Okay.
Basically, is what it was.
It's a recurring theme.
Yeah, and certain tempos. At that time, he didn't do stuff too fast.
Right.
Somewhere in the 90s, 92, 90, 93, somewhere up in there.
And then as you're settling into Atlanta, you've been there a few years at this point. What made it comfortable or happy or a good place for you?
I hooked up with Dallas Austin and the whole Rowdy Records crew, and basically had a compound, just big old building. There was, I think, 4 different rooms in it. There was an A room, a B room, and then 2 smaller rooms, C and D.
Was it a gray building on the outside?
It was brick. Brick.
Because I remember I went to one of his compounds, but maybe it might have been a year or two after that then. But anyway.
And so that's where we all hung out. Even if you weren't working, we hung out there.
Okay.
There was a hoop court in the back. There was a big old lobby thing with a pool table.
Okay.
So you only went home to change clothes, and that would be after 2 or 3 days.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just a big old family. Every Sunday, his mom would make dinner for us.
Wow.
So it was just definitely a big old family, and we just all vibed with each other, hung out with each other, and it was just music all the time, and at all hours of the night. Like, there was no times when we wasn't working on it or not thinking about it. So yeah, that definitely made it fun and then a good place to be, and help progress, and then learn songwriting from a great songwriter as well. So I learned hip hop and gangster rap with Dre, but learned that whole pop R&B stuff with Dallas.
And what specifically did you pick up that was different? Because Dre, of course, obviously had Michelle A. and has worked with R&B as well. But how did Dallas, approach or look at things differently, songwriting wise, or artistically or sonically?
Well, I guess musically it's similar to how I was already coming up with stuff, with just learning how he would work with melodies, with lyrics and melodies and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I guess musically it would be different than rap, because now you have strings and stuff like that, so a little bit more softer and prettier sounding.
And you have runs
yeah,
instead of ad libs.
But learning the formula. I mean, at that time there was definitely a formula and how songs were sang, and your verses would start at one point, your pre-chorus is another rhythm, another melody, then your hook, and how it's supposed to move and make you feel and stuff. So learning that part of it.
And then too, with the music scene, the thing I thought was interesting is with the explosion of LaFace and then Rowdy, it not exactly a parallel, but somewhat similar to the explosion of Ruthless and Rhyme Syndicate and all the things that were going out here in Los Angeles. But what did you notice was different about the consumer, the fans, how the fans reacted or took to the music that was coming out of LA versus the people in Georgia were taking to the music coming out of Atlanta?
Well, I guess Georgia is more hometown.
Okay.
So, and smaller too. So people would definitely come out and support their people, whether it be Goody Mob, Outkast, Usher, Monica, Sammy. They definitely would have their hometown people come and support, and just more smaller town. You know what I mean? So it's not as big as L.A. or New York.
Right. Okay. And then you mentioned Goody Mob, of course, and you work with them as well.
Yeah.
So with Goody Mob, I always thought it was interesting because I think Outkast is the best rap group of all time, but I also think that a lot of people, and arguably myself included, think that maybe Soul Food might be the best album that came out of the Dungeon family.
Yeah.
So what, in your opinion, musically, thematically, however you want to approach it, what makes Soul Food such a great song and a great album?
And then again, I think because of the group, you have more people there. So I think just energy is even amped up even more. And then you got, people like CeeLo who can sing, and I know Joy sang on some of the stuff.
Right.
So I think they brought more elements into the Goody Mob album. And then them coming off the Outkast record, yeah, they're just already got their feet wet and they taste a little success, so hungry for it again. So they're back in it and trying to get it again. And then I think the same thing with the Dog Pound with Goody Mob. You have a bunch of people checking each other and going back and forth and stuff. So I think that helped with the lyric stuff and the creativeness on that album.
And how did you see Organized Noize interacting with their artists versus how you saw Dre and Yella interacting with their artists? What's the interaction like with you as a musician and then the artist as rappers or singers?
Well, I think the best results come when you connect with the artists or the musicians, and they're like part of your family. Because I know with we all stayed at the house in Calabasas with Dre and them. Snoop, Warren G, everybody. We all stayed out there. And I know in the early days of the Dungeon family, they're all at Rico's place, at his mom's place. And they were all just always hanging out together, eat together, and the whole nine. So I think when you have that connection with the people you work with, whether it's the musicians or the artists, I think you have better results.
And as we're talking with Colin Wolfe here, he's talked about all these major movements and stuff, but we'll have to have him back for part 2 probably because there's a lot more else to discuss. But in the interim of that, or until that happens, I wanted you to explain what you're working on now, because I know you're still active and doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to explain that as we wrap up here on the Soren Baker Show.
For sure. So I have an artist now I'm working with. Her name is Sion. Randy Jackson is behind that project. So
nice.
We're slowly putting the group together, just doing some showcases here and there. We have a showcase coming up at Harvell's on the 15th, and we're going to do a bunch of little small things first, and then...
And what type of music is it? What's the genre?
It's kind of like blues and soul, live instruments and stuff, so just good songs, good songwriting and all that. And then also working with N.W.A. N.W.A was on Concord, on Starbucks label, when Starbucks had a label.
Well, wait, Concord also the jazz label or different?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. They were the ones controlling the Starbucks label when Starbucks had that label.
Right.
That was like early 2000s, something like that.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
And so I worked on that record with N.W.A.
Okay.
And after that, she went off and did a couple of other records. But now she wants to go back to the whole organic thing that we did before. And so her and I have been in the studio lately creating some stuff as well.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And at this point, do you look at things as just music, or do you have, you get excited to do a rap song for this reason and an R&B song for this reason and a rock song or whatever else for this reason? Or is it just, you just look at it as music?
No, I haven't even done rap lately. It doesn't move me anymore.
Okay.
Like it used to. I'm into songwriting right now and just how songs make you feel. And to me, songs can last longer than rap. Because sometimes rap is just a fad. It just, in that time era that it's in, some of it, at least the stuff that's out today. And songs, to me, I don't know, songs just hit me a little deeper. I just like writing songs now lately.
And why do you think rap is that way?
I think because of social media, you can have instant success, and I don't think kids are... I think it has a lot to do with social media because they're out there flashing their money and their cars and this and that, so they feel like they have to talk about that, and they're not being... There are some dope artists that don't talk about that stuff, that are making great records.
Well, do you think that affects other genres of music to the degree it does rap?
I think a little bit.
Okay.
Because of the popularity of it. So I think it spills over sometimes, but the artists, to me, that keeps their integrity and still make great records, they'll last through all of that other stuff.
Right. And that's the point, I think, too, with a lot of the classic rap or the great rap.
Yeah.
While it may have a time capsule effect in a way, when it's able to transcend everything, even if it's like I was saying, even a Hootie Hoo, like it's 2019, that song came out in 94, and it didn't have a video, it wasn't a real single or anything like that, but my friends and I, or people that I know, when they bring up Southern Playlist of Cadillac Music, sometimes they mention that song, and that's
for sure.
And it's toward the end of the album. It's not like it's the third song or anything. It's it's toward the end of the album, but people love that song. Because of the feel and the energy and the sonics of it, and then of course, the lyrics and everything else. But I always am curious about the timestamp element of music because back we had mentioned the Beatles earlier. It's just astonishing now when I hear Beatles music, the mix and the space that the instruments have and all that, and they did that in the 60s, and sonically it sounds better than almost everything that comes out now, which is it's a testament to what they did, but it's also a testament to understand music. That the sonics of it are just staggering, and they used the different channels, and I know obviously Ruthless, you guys did that especially on, I think, 100 Miles and Running. Surprise, because I remember there was when there was the running sounds and stuff.
Right, panning, panning. And we had to do all that stuff by hand. I was on this part, Jerry would be here, another guy would be on there, and you control Jerry will 8 things or whatever. Make sure you did your mutes or pans or whatever. Yeah, and if you fucked up, we had to start over.
Start it all over. No punching.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And no automation at that time.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, that's it for here for the Soren Baker Show for this episode with Colin Wolfe. And for people that do want to find you on social media, how can they get in touch with you?
I have an Instagram account that's CWolf86 or Colin Wolfe 86 on Instagram.
Okay.
Other than that, Facebook. And the artists I'm getting behind, Sion and N.W.A. Make sure they follow her. I think Sion is Sizzle Bizzle. I'm not sure what Angie's IG name is, but it might just be just her name.
Well, there it is, y'all. Well, thanks again for coming through, Colin Wolfe. It's been a pleasure, man, and thank you very much for all you've done for music, and then for sharing a lot of that with us today. Hopefully, we'll get you back for part 2 soon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you.
How's that?
All right, Soren Baker Show. We're out. Make sure to like, subscribe, download, share, and talk about us so we can keep this going. Appreciate it, y'all.
Yeah.